So, pick up that phone because I called it. Approximately last year I made a video called, are people getting sick of the anti-SJW content? And in this, I basically said this, sooner or later, Sargon is going to say something that will upset his audience, and that is now where he is basically going. Now, recently Sargon's been, so we say, engaging with the alt-right. Now the problem is Sargon went about engaging the alt-right completely wrong. In fact, I've done a video basically on how you should engage with people on the alt-right. You want to go watch that? Go watch that. Great. But we're here to talk about Sargon's meltdown. I suppose it could have been said in recent days, and it's kind of funny because Sargon's got no one to blame for this but himself. Now, what Sargon has been doing for years is he's been heavily focusing on small, minute, really non-issue problems. The idea that somehow there's this evil SJW conspiracy and they're all going to take over. Well, what? This conspiracy's been going on for what? Nearly 5 years now? None of these people are in power. None of these people have passed laws, you know, that that, you know, Sargon claims they would have passed. None of this would have happened. None of this has happened at all. But what has happened is, again, a video I made a couple of years ago now, was what I call the magnifying glass problem. So someone like Sargon, who has, what, a couple of million viewers, focuses his lens on one extremist, left-winger, and goes, oh, look, you see, all the left wing, see, they're all like that. And that's not ever been the case at all in reality. You have Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is doing exactly the same thing, which is kind of funny, because he says, oh, this is now starting to seep into HR departments. Look at what happened to James Damore. Yeah, look what happened to James Damore. Whenever he's asked to produce evidence to back up his claims, he doesn't have the emails anymore, and there's only him claiming this. Remember, when he first got fired, he was like, oh yeah, there are tons of people in Google that support me. The silence to that is deafening to those apparent people who support him. And they're not afraid of getting fired, they just don't support him. He's living in a fantasy land, and a lot of these people they are basically performing the oldest thing in the book. It's basically like the Red Scare all over again, and now you have the rise of the alt-right, who have been built on that, who are a reactionary force compared to that, and because of people like Sargon have for years scared these idiots, these young fools, and I'm just going to call them, into doing this. It has now allowed these people to come out and go, yeah, openly racist comment this, openly racist comment that. What? How dare you get angry at me or say I'm racist for saying something that is racist? And they are just as bad as, the SJWs. In fact, I think they're probably worse, because in terms of who is actually closer to power, is it the SJWs or the alt-right? It's the alt-right that is closer to power than anyone in, SJW land. And this goes all the way back to what's recently happened with Sargon. He's built up his audience of, his right audience, but he's continuously always said, "Oh, I'm a liberal. Oh, I'm a liberal. You just don't understand. I'm a liberal." But he never talks about policy. He always talks about this ridiculous, you know, what's the best way to describe it? College-age sophistry, basically. That's what he engages in. He never talks about real, actual world policies. And that's why, when he went on the Majority Report, he got trashed. Because you had, I'm trying to remember who it was now. It was Mark something or other was his name. When he was talking to Sargon. And when he's asking, so what about, you know, real-life policy? And Sargon's just got no answer, no comeback to that. Because he engages in sophistry, in intellectual, you know, masturbation, just getting it off and not talking about real world, actual life and implications. And, you know, most people on the left, most of the, you know, other people on the left, you know, are talking about that real world type of implications and what that means to the future. You've got Sargon, who, again, at this moment in time said, oh yeah, don't worry guys, I'm making a video on, you know, leaving the EU, you know, how good it is. I've been following this whole thing since it started, and I tell you now, none of it is good. You've got to do some extreme cherry picking to be able to justify leaving the EU. And we're talking extreme cherry picking. So, a great example of this is actually this morning on the Daily Express, nonetheless. So they looked at the leaked impact assessments, and basically they cherry-picked this one statement from a banker who basically said, look, we've been doing stress tests on our institution to make sure that we are ready just in case the worst happens. And he said, it looks like we're going to be all right. They've extrapolated this and just gone, yeah, literally from that one comment, they've lit their front headline is, Brexit Britain will be robust. And that's not even the case. We went over yesterday on the cross-sector analysis on going all over the sectors that it had covered. Every single sector comes off worse than we currently are now, being in EU membership with full benefits and everything. Will Sargon admit that, or will he go into extreme cherry picking? I'm betting he will go into extreme cherry picking, because there is no way he can do a video on the EU and come out and saying, yeah, it's all good. He did a This Week in Stupid covering Jacob Rees-Mogg, saying how wonderful Jacob Rees-Mogg is. Jacob Rees-Mogg doesn't give a damn about normal working class people. One of his policies is, oh, we've got to take down tower blocks. We've got to take down tower blocks, and instead we'll replace those tower blocks with houses. What? Okay, so a tower block can house up to 200 people, roughly, depending on how high you want to build it. Right? The area that you might be able to, the amount of people you can probably house just on that one building houses is only going to be about 10 at the most. And what do you do then with all these other people who have suddenly lost their, you know, their flat in that place? What do you do with them? He doesn't care. He's basically reinforcing the exact same policy that the government has been enforcing for years. Oh yeah, we'll build more. We'll encourage the building of more houses. Who does these building of houses? Oh, that's right, housing companies and builders who buy land. Literally, I can point out at this window right now, there is a housing estate. That piece of land has been selected for development for about nearly 10 years. No houses were built until literally the tail end of last year. That land has been sitting empty doing nothing, and then all of a sudden, oh, look, houses. Why? Because now is a good time to build these houses. Not only that, but this entire housing estate, which is huge, they are building it literally piece by piece. They're not spending all this money to build it, all at once, because if they did that, then they literally are devaluing their own houses. They are building the houses as slowly as possible, this entire housing estate as slowly as possible, and they are not literally building the next set of houses until the current houses they have built have been sold, because then it will keep the prices high. What you need, as I've said before, you need to force these companies to build the low-end tier of housing, which is what we are desperately lacking. But no, these housing companies do not want to build that because they don't make as much money, because they want to build the mid-tier group of housing. Because that is what will make them the most amount of money. Now, this encounters a huge problem, because the problem is the people who need the low, sort of the low tier level of housing and social housing don't get it, because you're handing this idea over to people who do not want to build that level of housing. Does Sargon ever talk about that? No. Because, yeah, you may have noticed there is an anti-capitalist bent to that. Because that is a problem. If you put a profit motive to a company and say, look, you've got this land, build houses on it, what type of houses are they going to build? They're going to build the type of house that will make them the most money, and they will do it in to get the biggest amount of property value from it they can. They don't care that there might be people who need the low tier end or even social housing. They don't care about that. And this is what, ironically, the government needs to do, needs to focus on, to get these housing companies to be, not to go, okay, we're going to let you build. You should force companies, okay, this is what you are going to build. And they will find a housing company specifically to build that type of house. Councils should have more power over this. But is this talked about in this? No. The housing crisis is a big issue in the UK currently. And Brexit is not going to solve it. Remember, immigration from the EU is about 12%. Those are official Home Office numbers. So literally, all these people who voted for Brexit to get rid of immigration, congratulations, you've only solved about 12% of the total immigration to this country. And by the way, before someone even says it, oh, we couldn't make our own laws regarding immigration, we absolutely could. That is a bald-faced lie. We absolutely could. The problem is you've had governments, and as I've said continuously, we have a lot of industries in this country that are addicted to migrant labour. And you also have a problem that you've got a lot of people in the British public that do not want to do these types of jobs that the migrants go and do and take. So you lose, what, 12% of your total immigration. You've got countries like India and Brazil that have said any trade deal we will do with you, we want better visa access, which basically means you're changing essentially the immigration pattern from being Poles, Czechs and Slovakians to now Indians and Brazilians. We really are going back to the 1950s. But yeah, so yeah, this is the ridiculous state that people are in. And what's funny, just to wrap all of this video off, just to come back to Sargon, is he's now said he's going to set up his own liberalist party, his own liberalist movement. They're going to be campaigning. I look forward to what actually they're going to be campaigning about, because then Sargon will actually have to talk about policy, real life policy, because I've never heard him actually talk about real life policy before, and that will be interesting, because the closest he's come to it is a couple of times where he's talked about in his debate with the EU. That was it with Thunderfoot, and he couldn't name a single law that affected him, or that that was bad. But that's Sargon all over. It's just intellectual masturbation. That's all he practices. That's all he preaches in, and it looks like a lot of people are actually realising that finally, which is good. So, someone new, I suspect, will take his place. It always happens when there's a vacuum like this. There's always someone new to step in. So someone will replace Sargon in the whatever sphere now, whatever it's going to be called. And then Sargon will go off and do his own liberal thing, where I'm sure he will not talk about policy again. So, that's the current state. So what do you think to all this nonsense that's been going on? Because I think, quite frankly, it's ridiculous.